December 7, 1944. Highway 64, Luxembourg. The rumbling grew louder as German machine gunner Unteroffizier Klaus Weber pressed his eye to the scope of his MG-42. Positioned in a concrete bunker overlooking the strategic crossroads below. Through the morning fog, he watched what should have been impossible. Another American convoy, the third in 6 hours, grinding steadily eastward toward the German frontier. Massive six-wheeled trucks, their olive drab paint barely visible through the winter mist, carrying supplies that would soon be turned against his own forces. Weber had been told by his officers that American logistics were primitive, dependent on railways that German sabotage had crippled. Yet here was evidence that contradicted everything Wehrmacht intelligence had reported. These weren't trains. These were motor vehicles, hundreds of them, moving supplies across terrain where no railroad existed. Each truck carried tonnage that would have required multiple horse-drawn wagons, and they moved with mechanical precision that horse teams could never achieve. What Weber couldn't know, what no German soldier could have comprehended in December 1944, was that he was witnessing the culmination of the most massive logistics operation in human history. The Red Ball Express had evolved into something far beyond its original scope. American truck convoys were delivering 20,000 tons of supplies daily across liberated Europe, maintaining advance rates that German doctrine said were mathematically impossible without rail support. The trucks kept coming. Weber counted 47 vehicles in this convoy alone, each one identical, each one loaded to capacity, each one representing American industrial might that German planners had catastrophically underestimated. The lead vehicle bore white stars and tactical markings Weber couldn't decipher. Behind it, truck after truck stretched into the distance, their canvas covers concealing cargo that would determine the war's outcome. But what stunned Weber most wasn't the quantity of vehicles, it was their condition. These trucks showed no signs of breakdown or mechanical failure. Their engines ran smoothly despite obvious heavy use. Their tires appeared nearly new. Everything about these convoys suggested maintenance standards and parts availability that Germany hadn't possessed even before the war began. The mathematics of American truck production were staggering beyond German comprehension. By December 1944, American factories had manufactured over 800,000 military trucks of all classes. The GMC CCTW 2.5-ton cargo truck alone accounted for 560,000 units. These vehicles rolled off assembly lines faster than Germany could produce artillery shells. Detroit's automotive infrastructure, converted to military production, achieved output levels that made German truck manufacturing appear artisanal by comparison. Weber's observations that December morning captured a transformation that had begun 2 years earlier when American planners realized that European transportation networks couldn't support the logistics requirements of mechanized warfare. The solution wasn't to build more railroads or depend on captured infrastructure. The solution was to create mobile supply lines using standardized trucks that could traverse any terrain where roads existed, and many places where they didn't. The convoy Weber watched represented just one small segment of a transportation network spanning thousands of miles. From the beaches of Normandy to the approaches of the Rhine, American trucks maintained supply lines that fed, armed, and equipped over 3 million Allied soldiers. This logistical achievement dwarfed anything attempted in military history, yet it operated with efficiency that made it appear routine to observers who didn't understand its complexity. Each truck in Weber's view carried specialized cargo determined by sophisticated planning systems that German logistics officers couldn't match. Some vehicles transported ammunition manufactured in plants across America and shipped across the Atlantic. Others carried rations processed in facilities that had been farmland 3 years earlier. Still others delivered fuel refined from Texas crude oil and transported through pipelines that existed only because American engineers had made them reality. The standardization astounded technically minded German observers. Every truck used identical parts, identical maintenance procedures, identical fuel requirements. A transmission failing in Luxembourg could be replaced with components manufactured in Michigan. A tire destroyed by enemy action could be swapped with spares produced in Ohio. This interchangeability, taken for granted by American forces, represented engineering coordination beyond German industrial capability. Weber's unit had been briefed on American supply vulnerabilities. German intelligence insisted that cutting these truck routes would paralyze Allied advances, destroy enough bridges, crater enough roads, ambush enough convoys, and American forces would grind to a halt. These briefings assumed American logistics operated like German systems, dependent on fixed infrastructure and vulnerable to interdiction. The reality proved different. American truck convoys adapted to obstacles with flexibility that German planners hadn't anticipated. When bridges were destroyed, engineers constructed bypasses within hours. When roads were cratered, bulldozers cleared alternate routes. When convoys were ambushed, backup supplies flowed through parallel channels. The system possessed redundancy that made individual attacks ineffective against overall operations. What Weber observed wasn't just transportation, it was the visible manifestation of American industrial democracy applied to warfare. These trucks represented factories retooled from civilian production, workers trained in skills that hadn't existed before Pearl that coordinated effort systems across continental distances. Every dyed American capacity vehicle embryo to transform peacetime abundance into wartime superiority. The psychological impact on German forces proved as significant as the material effects. Soldiers like Weber, who had witnessed the gradual collapse of German supply lines, watched American convoys with growing despair. While Wehrmacht units rationed ammunition and fuel, American forces received supplies in quantities that suggested unlimited resources. This contrast undermined German morale more effectively than any propaganda campaign. December 1944 marked the peak of American truck convoy operations in Europe. The statistics told a story of logistical dominance that German commanders couldn't counter. Over 240,000 American trucks operated in the European theater, supported by maintenance facilities, spare parts inventories, and fuel distribution systems that functioned with industrial precision. These vehicles consumed 1.5 million gallons of gasoline daily, while delivering supplies that kept Allied armies advancing despite German resistance. The convoys Weber observed represented multiple supply classifications moving simultaneously through coordinated networks. Class 1 supplies included rations that fed armies in the field. Class 3 encompassed petroleum products that powered vehicles and aircraft. Class 5 covered ammunition that maintained Allied firepower superiority. Each classification required specialized handling, but American logistics integrated everything through systems that operated around the clock. German attempts to disrupt these convoys achieved tactical successes, but strategic failure. Individual trucks could be destroyed, specific routes could be temporarily blocked, but the overall system continued functioning. American planners had designed redundancy into every aspect of the operation. Multiple routes connected supply depots to forward units. Reserve stocks compensated for temporary shortages. Alternative transportation methods filled gaps when primary systems faced disruption. The trucks themselves represented technological advantages German industry couldn't match. American vehicles featured automatic transmissions that simplified driver training. Power steering reduced operator fatigue during long hauls. Standardized electrical systems enabled rapid repairs using common components. These innovations, developed for civilian markets, provided military advantages when applied to logistics operations. Weber's position offered perfect observation of American maintenance procedures that kept these convoys operational. Trucks showing mechanical problems pulled aside, while others continued without disruption. Mobile repair units appeared within minutes, equipped with tools and parts necessary for roadside fixes. Vehicles requiring major service were replaced immediately from reserve pools, ensuring convoy schedules remained unaffected by individual breakdowns. The human element proved as impressive as the mechanical systems. American drivers operated with professionalism that surprised German observers expecting amateur soldiers. These men had been trained on standardized equipment, using methods that emphasized competency over lengthy experience. They could maintain, repair, and operate their vehicles under conditions that would have challenged pre-war professionals. By the time Weber's convoy disappeared into the eastern distance, he had witnessed something that would haunt German defenders throughout the war's final months. American truck convoys didn't just deliver supplies. They delivered proof that German assumptions about American industrial capacity had been fatally wrong. Every vehicle represented production capability that Germany couldn't match, organizational skill that Wehrmacht logistics couldn't equal, and resource abundance that made German scarcity strategies meaningless. The implications extended beyond immediate military concerns. These convoys demonstrated that American industry had achieved something German planners thought impossible: the conversion from peacetime production to military requirements without sacrificing quality or quantity. Detroit's assembly lines that had produced civilian automobiles were manufacturing military trucks at rates that exceeded German production of all vehicle types combined. Weber's observations that December morning captured the moment when German forces realized they faced an enemy whose logistical capabilities made prolonged resistance futile. The trucks kept coming because American industry kept building them. The supplies kept flowing because American systems had been designed to function regardless of tactical setbacks. The convoys kept rolling because American abundance made German scarcity tactics irrelevant. What began as routine observation duty became Weber's education in American industrial warfare. Every truck represented lessons German military doctrine hadn't prepared him to understand. These weren't just vehicles transporting cargo. They were symbols of productive capacity that had transformed global conflict into an exercise in manufacturing superiority where the side that could build more, faster, and better would inevitably triumph. The rumbling faded as the convoy disappeared beyond Weber's observation range, but its significance remained. American truck convoys had proven that modern warfare belonged to nations capable of sustaining massive industrial effort across continental distances. Germany had prepared to fight a war of tactical brilliance and strategic daring. America had prepared to fight a war of logistical dominance and productive superiority. Weber was witnessing which preparation would prove decisive. The convoy's dust had barely settled when Weber heard the distinctive whine of approaching engines from the opposite direction. Another formation emerged from the morning haze, this one heading west toward the Channel ports. Empty trucks returning for their next load, their canvas covers flapping in the December wind. Weber realized he was witnessing a continuous cycle, an endless loop of American vehicles flowing east with supplies and west for replenishment. These return convoys moved with the same mechanical precision as their loaded counterparts. Drivers maintained identical spacing, identical speeds, identical formations. The emptiness of their cargo beds didn't diminish their operational tempo. If anything, the unburdened trucks moved faster, completing the cycle that would bring them back within days, carrying fresh supplies for Allied armies. Weber counted the returning vehicles with growing unease. 43 trucks in this westbound convoy, each one representing capacity that would soon be filled again. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. If American convoys could maintain this pace continuously, their supply capacity exceeded anything German forces could interdict through tactical action. The system's scale made individual attacks meaningless against its overall function. From his concrete bunker, Weber watched the organizational precision that kept these convoys moving. Military police at the crossroads directed traffic with hand signals that trucks obeyed instantly. No confusion, no delays, no vehicles blocking intersections, while drivers consulted maps or received new orders. Everything flowed according to predetermined schedules that operated with clockwork regularity. The fuel consumption alone should have crippled such operations, Weber thought. Each truck burned gasoline at rates that would have exhausted German reserves within days. Yet these convoys operated continuously without apparent concern for fuel availability. American petroleum abundance made conservation strategies irrelevant. While German vehicles sat immobilized by empty fuel tanks, American trucks consumed gasoline as if it were unlimited. Weber's technical training helped him appreciate details that ordinary soldiers might miss. The truck's tires showed wear patterns consistent with high mileage, yet none appeared dangerously worn. Replacement tires must be reaching forward units regularly, maintaining vehicle readiness despite heavy use. German forces had been rationing tires since 1942, often cannibalizing damaged vehicles to keep others operational. American abundance made such expedients unnecessary. The radio antennas visible on several vehicles indicated communication capabilities that connected these convoys to higher headquarters. Real-time coordination between supply columns, receiving units, and intermediate depots. German truck columns, when they existed at all, operated with minimal communication, relying on predetermined routes and schedules that couldn't adapt to changing conditions. American flexibility suggested command systems far more sophisticated than anything Wehrmacht logistics possessed. Weather conditions that would have halted German operations seemed to have minimal impact on American convoys. Light snow had begun falling, coating the roadway with slush that made traction difficult. Yet the trucks maintained their steady pace without apparent concern. Their tires gripped effectively on surfaces where German vehicles would have struggled. Even their basic equipment advantages compounded into operational superiority. Weber observed maintenance vehicles interspersed among the supply trucks. Mobile workshops equipped with tools, spare parts, and trained mechanics who could perform repairs without returning to fixed facilities. This forward maintenance capability kept more trucks operational by addressing problems before they became serious failures. German maintenance doctrine required vehicles to return to rear area workshops, removing them from service for extended periods. The standardization extended beyond mechanical components to operational procedures. Every driver responded identically to road conditions, traffic control, and convoy discipline. This uniformity suggested training programs that produced competent operators quickly rather than relying on lengthy apprenticeships. American mass production principles applied to human resources as well as manufactured goods. As morning progressed, Weber witnessed the full scope of American convoy operations. Supply trucks carrying different cargo types, maintenance vehicles providing mobile support, fuel tankers ensuring continuous operations, and command vehicles coordinating the entire system. Each element functioned as part of an integrated whole, rather than independent units pursuing separate objectives. The psychological impact on German defenders proved cumulative. Every convoy that passed Weber's position delivered proof that American resources exceeded German capacity to interdict them. Destroying individual trucks achieved nothing when hundreds more followed. Blocking specific routes accomplished little when alternate paths existed. The system's redundancy made tactical victories strategically meaningless. Weber's ammunition supply consisted of 1,200 rounds for his MG-42, carefully rationed to last several weeks. The American trucks carried ammunition in quantities that German units consumed monthly. This contrast illustrated the fundamental disparity between German scarcity and American abundance. While Wehrmacht forces hoarded every cartridge, American units fired at will, confident that resupply would arrive on schedule. The convoy routing demonstrated planning sophistication that impressed even critical observers. Vehicles carrying different cargo types followed separate paths to avoid congestion at delivery points. Supply schedules coordinated with unit movements to ensure materials arrived when needed, rather than creating storage problems. This integration required communication systems and planning staffs that German logistics couldn't match. Weber noticed that American truck drivers appeared well-fed, well-equipped, and professionally competent. Their uniforms showed quality construction and proper fit. Their equipment functioned reliably under field conditions. Even support personnel received resources that German combat troops couldn't obtain. This attention to logistics personnel welfare maintained operational effectiveness by preventing the neglect that plagued German supply systems. The medical evacuation vehicles interspersed among supply convoys provided another demonstration of American thoroughness. Wounded soldiers received transportation to medical facilities using the same efficient systems that delivered ammunition and rations. German wounded often waited days for evacuation, if it came at all. American integration of all logistics functions, including medical support, maintained unit effectiveness by ensuring rapid treatment of casualties. By midday, Weber had observed over 200 American vehicles passing his position. Each one represented industrial capacity, organizational skill, and resource abundance that Germany couldn't match. The trucks kept coming because American factories kept building them. American training programs kept producing competent operators, and American supply systems kept providing fuel, parts, and maintenance support. The weather deteriorated as afternoon approached, with heavier snow reducing visibility and making roads treacherous. Weber expected American convoy operations to slow or halt entirely. Instead, trucks continued passing at regular intervals, their drivers adapting to conditions without losing operational tempo. Snow chains, tire compounds, and driver training enabled continued operations despite weather that would have stopped German movements. Weber's radio crackled with reports from other observation posts along the German front. Every position reported similar observations. American convoys moving continuously in both directions, maintaining supply lines that fed Allied armies regardless of tactical situations or weather conditions. The scale exceeded anything German intelligence had predicted or German logistics could counter. The fuel trucks particularly captured Weber's attention. These vehicles carried gasoline in quantities that represented weeks of German allocation for entire divisions. American petroleum abundance enabled operational freedom that German forces hadn't possessed since 1942. While Wehrmacht units planned movements around fuel availability, American forces moved first and received fuel as needed. As evening approached, Weber realized he had witnessed something that would haunt German defenders throughout the war's remaining months. American truck convoys represented more than transportation systems. They embodied industrial capacity that had transformed global warfare into an exercise in productive superiority where victory belonged to nations capable of sustaining massive logistics efforts across unlimited time periods. The trucks kept coming because American abundance made German scarcity strategies meaningless. Every vehicle represented lessons that German military doctrine hadn't prepared Weber to understand. These convoys didn't just deliver supplies, they delivered proof that the war's outcome had been determined by industrial capacity rather than tactical brilliance, and that American factories had won victories that German armies couldn't reverse. The darkness brought no relief from the mechanical symphony that had tormented Weber throughout the day. If anything, the night convoys moved with even greater precision, their headlights cutting through the December blackness like searchlights probing enemy positions. Weber adjusted his position in the bunker, his joints stiff from hours of observation, and prepared for what he suspected would be another sleepless night, watching American logistics in action. The first nocturnal convoy appeared at 1847 hours. Its lead vehicle, equipped with infrared driving lights, that allowed navigation without betraying position to enemy aircraft. Weber had heard rumors of such technology but dismissed them as Allied propaganda. Yet here was proof that American engineers had solved problems German scientists hadn't even attempted to address. Night operations that German doctrine considered impossible were routine procedure for American supply columns. Weber counted 62 vehicles in this formation, more than he had observed in any single daylight convoy. The Americans were using darkness not for concealment, but for expanded operations, moving larger formations when German air interdiction posed minimal threat. This tactical adaptation demonstrated flexibility that Wehrmacht logistics had never achieved, even during the victorious campaigns of 1940 and 1941. The maintenance procedures that kept these night convoys operational astounded Weber even more than their daylight counterparts. Mobile repair units equipped with portable lighting systems performed engine work beside active roadways. Welding equipment sparked it in the darkness as mechanics fabricated replacement parts from raw materials. This forward maintenance capability eliminated the delays that would have crippled German operations attempting similar schedules. Each truck carried spare parts inventories that exceeded what German units received for monthly maintenance allocations. Weber observed drivers replacing tires, adjusting carburetors, and performing preventive maintenance during brief rest stops. American abundance extended to the smallest components, ensuring vehicle readiness through systematic attention to details that German forces had been forced to ignore since 1943. The fuel distribution system revealed another dimension of American logistical sophistication. Tank trucks, positioned at regular intervals, provided refueling services without breaking convoy momentum. Drivers topped off their tanks while other vehicles continued moving, maintaining operational tempo through procedures that eliminated traditional bottlenecks. German fuel shortages made such abundance seem almost insulting to forces rationing every liter. Weber's field telephone rang at 21:30 hours, connecting him to regimental headquarters 20 kilometers behind the front lines. His commanding officer wanted detailed reports on American convoy patterns, seeking intelligence that might reveal vulnerabilities for planned counterattacks. Weber dutifully reported vehicle counts, cargo types, and movement schedules, but privately doubted that tactical knowledge could overcome the fundamental disparity he was witnessing. The communication systems connecting American convoys operated with clarity that German signals equipment couldn't match. Weber intercepted radio transmissions between convoy commanders and traffic control points, noting the professional terminology and standardized procedures that enabled coordination across vast distances. These weren't amateur soldiers struggling with unfamiliar equipment. These were trained operators using systems designed for military efficiency. American drivers rotated regularly, maintaining alertness during extended operations. Weber observed relief drivers taking over vehicles without stopping convoy movement, seamlessly continuing journeys that might span hundreds of kilometers. German truck columns, when they operated at all, relied on individual drivers who became exhausted during long hauls, creating safety hazards and operational delays that American procedures eliminated. The cargo documentation visible through truck cab windows suggested inventory control systems that tracked every item from factory to front line. Serial numbers, destination codes, and priority classifications enabled precise delivery of materials to units that needed them most urgently. German supply systems relied on manual records that became unreliable under combat conditions, creating shortages of critical items while surpluses accumulated elsewhere. Weber noticed that American truck crews carried personal equipment that German soldiers hadn't seen since peacetime. Quality boots, warm clothing, reliable weapons, and adequate rations. Even support personnel received resources that Wehrmacht combat units couldn't obtain through normal channels. This attention to individual welfare maintained morale and effectiveness throughout the logistics chain, preventing the neglect that undermined German operations. The medical support integrated into American convoy operations provided another demonstration of systematic thoroughness. Ambulances traveled with supply columns, ensuring immediate evacuation of personnel injured during transport operations. German wounded often waited days for medical attention, if evacuation came at all. American integration of medical support with logistics operations maintained unit strength by providing rapid treatment for all categories of personnel. Weather conditions that would have halted German operations completely seemed to have minimal impact on American night convoys. Freezing rain coated roadways with ice that made traction nearly impossible. Yet trucks continued moving at reduced but steady speeds. Tire chains, weight distribution, and driver training enabled continued operations despite conditions that would have immobilized Wehrmacht vehicles entirely. The ammunition trucks particularly impressed Weber with their professional handling procedures. Explosive materials that German forces transported with extreme caution were moved routinely by American drivers who understood both safety requirements and operational necessities. Training programs had produced competent handlers quickly rather than relying on experienced personnel who required years of development. Weber observed that American convoy security included armored vehicles positioned throughout supply columns. Half-racks mounting automatic weapons provided protection against German infiltration attempts, while maintaining movement speeds that kept pace with truck formations. These escort vehicles were equipped with radio communications that could summon additional support within minutes if convoys encountered serious opposition. The standardization of American military equipment extended to details that German forces had never considered important enough to regulate. Every truck carried identical toolkits, spare parts assortments, and emergency supplies. This uniformity enabled any mechanic to service any vehicle using familiar procedures and compatible components. German equipment diversity created maintenance nightmares that reduced operational readiness significantly. As midnight approached, Weber realized he was witnessing the culmination of industrial planning that had begun years before American entry into the war. These convoys represented more than transportation systems. They embodied economic mobilization that had converted civilian manufacturing capacity into military logistics capability without sacrificing either quality or quantity of output. The psychological impact on German defenders proved as demoralizing as the material effects. Soldiers who had witnessed the gradual collapse of Wehrmacht supply lines watched American abundance with growing despair. While German units hoarded ammunition and fuel, American forces received supplies in quantities that suggested unlimited industrial capacity. This contrast undermined German resistance more effectively than direct military pressure. Weber's ammunition supply had dwindled to fewer than 800 rounds during his extended observation duty. The machine gun position that should have been resupplied weekly hadn't received fresh ammunition in over a month. Meanwhile, American trucks carried small arms ammunition in quantities that German regiments consumed quarterly. This disparity illustrated the fundamental difference between German scarcity and American abundance. The convoy routing continued demonstrating planning sophistication that German logistics officers couldn't duplicate. Supply vehicles carrying different materials followed separate paths to avoid congestion at distribution points. Delivery schedules coordinated with unit movements ensured materials arrived precisely when needed, rather than creating storage problems in forward areas. This integration required communication systems and planning staffs that Wehrmacht logistics had never possessed. Weber noticed that American maintenance personnel appeared as well-equipped and professionally trained as combat soldiers. Their tools functioned reliably under field conditions. Their spare parts inventories included components for complex repairs that German forces performed only at major depots. Even support specialists received resources and training that enabled high-quality work under combat conditions. The fuel consumption rates that should have crippled such extensive operations seemed to pose no constraints on American convoy schedules. Each truck burned gasoline at rates that would have exhausted German reserves within days. Yet convoys operated continuously without apparent concern for fuel availability. American petroleum abundance made conservation strategies that dominated German planning completely irrelevant to Allied operations. By 0300 hours, Weber had observed over 400 American vehicles passing his position since nightfall. Each one represented industrial achievement that Germany couldn't match, organizational capability that Wehrmacht doctrine couldn't equal, and resource abundance that made German defensive strategies meaningless. The trucks kept coming because American factories operated around the clock, producing vehicles faster than German forces could destroy them. The weather continued deteriorating with heavy snow that reduced visibility to less than 50 meters. Yet American convoys maintained their schedules without apparent difficulty. Snow removal equipment cleared roadways ahead of supply columns, while soldier trucks prevented ice formation that would have made travel impossible. German forces lacked such specialized equipment, making winter operations extremely hazardous even under ideal conditions. Weber's radio reported similar observations from defensive positions across the entire front. Every outpost confirmed continuous American convoy movements that maintained supply lines, regardless of tactical situations, weather conditions, or German interdiction attempts. The scale of operations exceeded anything Wehrmacht intelligence had predicted or German logistics could counter through conventional means. The medical evacuation capabilities integrated throughout American supply systems provided yet another demonstration of systematic planning that addressed every aspect of military operations. Wounded personnel received immediate transportation to treatment facilities using vehicles and routes that remained operational regardless of combat conditions. German medical evacuation relied on improvised arrangements that often failed when most needed. As dawn approached on December 8th, Weber prepared his daily intelligence report for regimental headquarters. The statistics were overwhelming. Over 600 American vehicles observed in 24 hours, carrying supplies that represented months of German production. The convoys moved with mechanical precision that suggested unlimited fuel, spare parts, and trained personnel. American abundance had transformed logistics from a constraint into an advantage that German forces couldn't overcome through tactical action alone. Weber's observations during this extended period revealed the true scope of American industrial mobilization applied to military logistics. These truck convoys represented more than transportation systems. They embodied economic capacity that had converted peacetime abundance into wartime superiority through planning and execution that German industry couldn't duplicate even under ideal peacetime conditions. The trucks kept coming because American democracy had proven capable of sustained industrial effort that totalitarian systems couldn't match. Every vehicle demonstrated lessons that German military doctrine hadn't prepared defenders to understand. These convoys didn't just deliver supplies. They delivered proof that modern warfare belonged to nations possessing both industrial capacity and organizational skill necessary to maintain massive logistics operations across unlimited distances and extended time periods. Weber's growing unease crystallized into a deeper understanding as he watched the precision with which American convoys navigated the treacherous December roads. These weren't desperate supply runs conducted under enemy pressure. These were routine operations, executed with industrial efficiency that suggested unlimited resources backing every movement. The drivers maintained perfect spacing despite icy conditions that would have scattered German formations across kilometers of countryside. The ammunition expenditure alone should have bankrupted such operations within weeks. Weber's own machine gun allocation represented careful rationing that German quartermasters had calculated down to individual cartridges. Yet American forces fired artillery barrages that consumed more shells in single engagements than Wehrmacht divisions received monthly. The trucks delivering these munitions operated as if production capacity rendered conservation meaningless. Each convoy demonstrated technological advantages that compounded into overwhelming superiority. The vehicles themselves incorporated innovations that German industry had never attempted. Automatic transmissions eliminated driver training bottlenecks that plagued Wehrmacht motor transport. Power steering reduced operator fatigue during extended hauls. Standardized electrical systems enabled rapid repairs using interchangeable components manufactured thousands of kilometers away. Weber observed American traffic control procedures that revealed organizational sophistication beyond German military capability. Military police directed convoy movements through complex intersections using predetermined signals that drivers obeyed instantly. No confusion, no delays, no vehicles blocking critical routes while commanders consulted maps or received updated orders. Everything flowed according to schedules that operated with clockwork precision despite changing battlefield conditions. The maintenance philosophies underlying American operations contradicted everything Weber had learned about military logistics. German doctrine emphasized preserving equipment through careful use and minimal wear. American practices seemed almost wasteful, with vehicles operated at maximum capacity and replaced, rather than extensively repaired. This abundance mentality reflected production capacity that could afford to prioritize operational tempo over equipment longevity. Communication systems connecting individual trucks to central coordination demonstrated integration that German forces had never achieved. Real-time updates flowed between convoy commanders, receiving units, and intermediate supply points. Route changes, delivery priorities, and emergency requirements received immediate responses that kept supplies flowing despite tactical complications. German truck columns operated with minimal communication, relying on predetermined plans that couldn't adapt to evolving situations. The psychological warfare aspects of these continuous convoys proved as effective as their material contributions. German soldiers, witnessing endless streams of American vehicles loaded with supplies, understood that their own shortages weren't temporary inconveniences, but permanent disadvantages. While Wehrmacht units hoarded every round and rationed fuel by the liter, American forces operated without apparent resource constraints. Weber's technical background helped him appreciate details that ordinary observers might miss. The tire compounds used on American trucks provided traction on surfaces where German vehicles lost grip entirely. Brake systems functioned reliably despite heavy loads and mountainous terrain. Engine cooling systems prevented overheating during extended operations. Even basic mechanical components represented engineering advances that German manufacturers hadn't implemented. The fuel distribution network supporting these convoys operated with efficiency that defied German understanding of petroleum logistics. Tank trucks, positioned at strategic intervals, provided refueling services without interrupting convoy movement. Drivers topped off their fuel tanks while formations continued moving, eliminating traditional bottlenecks that would have paralyzed German operations attempting similar schedules. American drivers demonstrated competency levels that surprised German observers, expecting amateur soldiers struggling with unfamiliar equipment. These men had received training on standardized vehicles using methods that produced qualified operators quickly rather than relying on lengthy apprenticeships. They could perform basic maintenance, navigate complex routes, and operate under combat conditions with professionalism that matched pre-war commercial drivers. The cargo documentation visible through truck cab windows suggested inventory control systems that tracked every item from manufacturing plant to forward positions. Serial numbers, destination codes, and priority classifications enabled precise delivery of materials to units requiring specific supplies most urgently. German logistics relied on manual records that became unreliable under field conditions, creating critical shortages while surpluses accumulated uselessly elsewhere. Weber noticed that American convoy security included measures that German forces couldn't afford to implement. Armored vehicles provided protection against infiltration attempts, while maintaining speeds that matched truck formations. These escorts carried radio equipment that could summon additional support within minutes if convoys encountered serious opposition. German supply columns traveled with minimal protection, making them vulnerable to partisan attacks and Allied airstrikes. The medical support integrated throughout American logistics operations provided another demonstration of systematic planning that addressed every aspect of military requirements. Ambulances traveled with supply convoys, ensuring immediate evacuation of personnel injured during transportation operations. Medical equipment, surgical supplies, and pharmaceutical stocks moved through the same efficient channels that delivered ammunition and rations. Weather conditions that would have completely halted German transportation continued having minimal impact on American convoy schedules. Specialized equipment cleared snow from roadways ahead of supply columns, while chemical treatments prevented ice formation that would have made travel impossible. German forces lacked such resources, making winter operations extremely hazardous even under optimal circumstances. The ammunition handling procedures employed by American drivers impressed Weber with their combination of safety consciousness and operational efficiency. Explosive materials that had routinely through German forces transported with extreme caution move supply chains operated by personnel who understood both regulatory requirements and tactical necessities. Training programs had produced competent handlers without requiring years of specialized experience. Weber observed that American truck crews carried personal equipment representing quality standards that German soldiers hadn't experienced since peacetime. Reliable boots, warm clothing, functional weapons, and adequate rations maintained morale throughout the logistics chain. Even support personnel received resources that Wehrmacht combat units couldn't obtain through normal supply channels, preventing the neglect that undermined German operational effectiveness. The standardization of American military equipment extended to components that German planners had never considered worth regulating. Every truck carried identical tool sets, spare parts inventories, and emergency supplies. This uniformity enabled any trained mechanic to service any vehicle using familiar procedures and compatible components, eliminating the maintenance complications created by German equipment diversity. American convoy routing demonstrated planning sophistication that required communication systems and coordination staffs beyond German organizational capability. Supply vehicles carrying different cargo types followed separate paths designed to prevent congestion at delivery points. Schedules synchronized with unit movements ensured materials arrived precisely when needed, rather than creating storage problems in forward areas where space was limited. The fuel consumption rates that should have constrained such extensive operations posed no apparent limitations on American logistics planning. Each truck burned gasoline at rates that would have exhausted German reserves within days, yet convoys operated continuously without concern for petroleum availability. American abundance made conservation strategies that dominated Wehrmacht planning completely irrelevant to Allied operational requirements. Weber's ammunition supply had decreased to fewer than 600 rounds during his extended observation duties. The machine gun position that should have received weekly resupply hadn't been replenished in over 6 weeks. Meanwhile, American trucks carried small arms ammunition in quantities that German battalions consumed over entire months of combat operations, illustrating the fundamental disparity between scarcity and abundance. The night vision equipment visible on American vehicles represented technological capabilities that German forces had never possessed. Infrared driving systems enabled navigation without revealing positions to enemy aircraft. Radio communications functioned clearly despite electronic interference that disrupted German equipment. Even basic systems incorporated innovations that provided operational advantages German industry couldn't duplicate. By December 10th, Weber had documented patterns that revealed the true scope of American logistics superiority. Convoys operated on schedules that delivered specific cargo types to predetermined destinations with precision that German railway systems had never achieved even during peacetime. The flexibility to adapt routes, modify schedules, and respond to changing requirements demonstrated organizational capability that Wehrmacht doctrine couldn't comprehend. The psychological impact on German defenders proved cumulative and demoralizing. Every convoy passing Weber's position delivered visible proof that American industrial capacity exceeded German ability to interdict supply lines through tactical action. Destroying individual vehicles accomplished nothing when hundreds more followed. Blocking specific routes achieved little when alternate paths existed throughout liberated territory. Weber's radio communications with other observation posts confirmed that similar convoy operations extended across the entire Western Front. Every defensive position reported continuous American truck movements, maintaining supply lines that fed Allied armies regardless of weather conditions, tactical situations, or German interdiction attempts. The scale exceeded anything Wehrmacht intelligence had predicted or German logistics could counter. The maintenance vehicles interspersed among supply trucks provided mobile workshop capabilities that kept more vehicles operational by addressing mechanical problems before they became serious failures. German maintenance doctrine required vehicles to return to rear area facilities, removing them from service for extended periods that reduced overall fleet availability significantly. American fuel trucks particularly captured Weber's attention because they carried petroleum products in quantities representing weeks of German allocation for entire armored divisions. These vehicles moved continuously between supply depots and forward positions, maintaining fuel availability that enabled American forces to operate without the movement restrictions that constrained Wehrmacht planning since 1942. The medical evacuation capabilities built into American convoy operations demonstrated integration that addressed every aspect of military requirements systematically. Wounded personnel received immediate transportation to treatment facilities using dedicated vehicles that remained operational regardless of combat conditions. German medical evacuation relied on improvised arrangements that frequently failed when most critically needed. Weber realized that American truck convoys represented more than efficient transportation systems. They embodied industrial mobilization that had converted civilian manufacturing capacity into military logistics capability without sacrificing quality or quantity of production. Every vehicle demonstrated economic power that Germany couldn't match even under ideal peacetime conditions. The weather continued challenging convoy operations with freezing rain that coated roadways with ice. Yet American trucks maintained schedules through specialized equipment and training that German forces had never possessed. Salt spreaders prevented ice formation, while snow plows cleared accumulation that would have blocked German movements entirely. As his observation period extended into its fourth day, Weber understood that he was witnessing the culmination of planning that had begun years before American entry into the war. These convoys didn't represent hasty improvisation, but systematic preparation that had anticipated logistics requirements and developed solutions that German planners had never considered necessary. The trucks kept coming because American abundance had transformed military logistics from a constraint into an operational advantage that German forces couldn't overcome through conventional tactics. Every vehicle carried proof that modern warfare belonged to nations possessing both industrial capacity and organizational skill necessary to sustain massive operations across unlimited distances and extended time periods. Weber's detailed observations revealed that American convoy operations functioned as components of integrated systems rather than independent transportation efforts. Supply deliveries coordinated with ammunition requirements, fuel distribution, medical evacuation, and maintenance support through communication networks that enabled real-time adaptation to changing battlefield conditions. The implications extended beyond immediate tactical concerns to fundamental questions about German strategic assumptions. If American industry could sustain such logistics efforts indefinitely, while German resources declined steadily, prolonged resistance would only delay inevitable defeat, rather than creating opportunities for favorable negotiations or tactical reversals. Weber's growing desperation intensified as he watched the fourth consecutive day of American convoy operations unfold with mechanical precision that defied everything Wehrmacht doctrine taught about logistics limitations. The morning of December 11th brought visibility so poor that German vehicles wouldn't have attempted movement. Yet American trucks materialized through the fog at precisely scheduled intervals, their headlights cutting through the murk like beacons of industrial inevitability. The convoy that emerged at 0630 hours carried cargo that Weber's trained eye identified as artillery shells, their distinctive shapes visible beneath canvas covers that flapped in the December wind. He counted 87 trucks in this formation alone, each one loaded with munitions that represented more firepower than his entire regiment had expended since the beginning of the war. The mathematical implications staggered him. If American industry could produce and deliver ammunition at such rates continuously, German defensive strategies based on forcing Allied forces to exhaust their supplies became meaningless exercises in futility. What distinguished these convoys from anything German forces had achieved wasn't just their size or frequency, but their apparent immunity to the logistical constraints that governed Wehrmacht operations. Weber had witnessed German supply columns grind to complete stops when individual vehicles broke down, creating bottlenecks that paralyzed entire formations for hours. American convoys demonstrated redundancy that eliminated such vulnerabilities. When trucks developed mechanical problems, they simply pulled aside, while others continued without disruption. Mobile repair units appeared within minutes, equipped with tools and replacement parts that enabled roadside fixes German mechanics could only dream of performing. The fuel consumption patterns alone should have crippled these operations within days. Yet the convoys maintained their relentless pace without apparent concern for petroleum availability. Weber calculated that the trucks passing his position burned more gasoline in 6 hours than his entire division received monthly. American abundance had transformed fuel from a precious resource requiring careful conservation into a commodity consumed without restraint. While German vehicles sat immobilized by empty tanks, American trucks operated as if petroleum flowed like water from inexhaustible sources. The maintenance procedures Weber observed through his field glasses revealed systematic approaches to equipment preservation that German forces had never implemented even during peacetime. American drivers performed preventive maintenance during brief rest stops, checking fluid levels, adjusting belts, and replacing components before failures occurred. This proactive philosophy contrasted sharply with German practices that emphasized equipment conservation through minimal use and reactive repairs only when breakdowns made operation impossible. Each truck carried spare parts inventories that exceeded what German units received for quarterly maintenance allocations. Weber watched drivers replace tires, repair electrical systems, and adjust carburetors using components that were apparently standardized across all American vehicles. This interchangeability eliminated the compatibility problems that plagued German equipment diversity, where different manufacturers produced vehicles requiring unique parts that were often unavailable when needed most critically. The communication systems connecting these convoys to higher headquarters functioned with clarity that German radio equipment couldn't achieve under ideal conditions. Weber intercepted transmissions between convoy commanders and traffic control centers. Noting the professional terminology and standardized procedures that enabled coordination across distances where German communications failed entirely. These weren't amateur soldiers struggling with unfamiliar technology, but trained operators using equipment designed specifically for military efficiency. American convoy security included measures that German forces couldn't afford to implement due to resource constraints. Armored vehicles positioned throughout supply columns provided protection against infiltration attempts while maintaining movement speeds that matched truck formations. These escorts carried automatic weapons and radio equipment capable of summoning additional support within minutes if convoys encountered serious opposition. German supply columns traveled with minimal protection, making them vulnerable to partisan attacks and Allied airstrikes that American forces seemed able to prevent through superior firepower and communication. The psychological warfare aspects of these continuous convoys proved as demoralizing as their material contributions to Allied combat capability. German soldiers, witnessing endless streams of American vehicles, understood that their own shortages weren't temporary inconveniences caused by tactical disruptions, but permanent disadvantages resulting from fundamental industrial inadequacy. While Wehrmacht units rationed ammunition and fuel with desperate precision, American forces operated without apparent resource limitations. Weber's technical background enabled him to appreciate innovations that ordinary observers might dismiss as insignificant details. The tire compounds used on American trucks provided traction on icy surfaces where German vehicles lost control entirely. Brake systems functioned reliably despite heavy loads and mountainous terrain that would have challenged peacetime commercial equipment. Engine cooling systems prevented overheating during extended operations in conditions that would have disabled German vehicles within hours. The standardization of American military equipment extended to components that German planners had never considered worth regulating systematically. Every truck carried identical toolkits, emergency supplies, and maintenance equipment that enabled any trained mechanic to service any vehicle using familiar procedures. German equipment diversity created maintenance nightmares, where mechanics required specialized knowledge for different manufacturers' products, reducing overall fleet readiness significantly. American drivers demonstrated competency levels that surprised German observers who expected amateur soldiers struggling with complex equipment. These men had received training on standardized vehicles using methods that produced qualified operators rapidly rather than relying on lengthy apprenticeships. They navigated complex routes, performed basic maintenance, and operated under combat conditions with professionalism that matched experienced commercial drivers from peacetime industries. The cargo documentation systems Weber observed through truck cab windows suggested inventory control methods that tracked every item from manufacturing facilities to forward positions with precision German logistics had never achieved. Serial numbers, destination codes, and priority classifications enabled accurate delivery of specific materials to units requiring particular supplies most urgently. German systems relied on manual records that became unreliable under field conditions, creating critical shortages while surpluses accumulated uselessly in wrong locations. Weather conditions that completely halted German transportation operations seemed to have minimal impact on American convoy schedules. Specialized snow removal equipment cleared roadways ahead of supply columns, while chemical treatments prevented ice formation that would have made travel impossible for Wehrmacht vehicles. German forces lacked such resources, making winter operations extremely hazardous even under optimal circumstances where enemy action posed no additional complications. The ammunition handling procedures employed by American personnel impressed Weber with their combination of safety consciousness and operational efficiency. Explosive materials that German forces transported with extreme caution moved routinely through supply chains operated by drivers who understood both regulatory requirements and tactical necessities. Training programs had produced competent handlers without requiring years of specialized experience that German systems demanded for similar responsibilities. American truck crews carried personal equipment representing quality standards that German soldiers hadn't experienced since before the war began. Reliable footwear, warm clothing, functional weapons, and adequate rations maintained morale throughout logistics chains that extended from channel ports to frontline positions. Even support personnel received resources that Wehrmacht combat units couldn't obtain through normal supply channels, preventing the neglect that undermined German operational effectiveness. The medical support integrated throughout American convoy operations provided systematic attention to personnel welfare that German logistics had never prioritized. Ambulances traveled with supply columns, ensuring immediate evacuation of individuals injured during transportation operations. Medical equipment, surgical supplies, and pharmaceutical stocks moved through the same efficient channels that delivered ammunition and fuel. demonstrating integration that addressed every aspect of military requirements comprehensively. Weber routing demonstrated planning sophistication requiring communication systems and coordination staffs beyond German organizational capability. Supply vehicles carrying different cargo types followed separate paths designed to prevent congestion at delivery points, where multiple units received materials simultaneously. Schedules synchronized with unit movements ensured supplies arrived precisely when needed, rather than creating storage problems in forward areas where space limitations complicated operations. The fuel distribution network supporting these convoys operated with efficiency that defied German understanding of petroleum logistics under combat conditions. Tank trucks, positioned at strategic intervals, provided refueling services without interrupting convoy movement schedules. Drivers replenished their fuel supplies while formations continued moving, eliminating traditional bottlenecks that would have paralyzed German operations, attempting similar operational tempos under resource constraints. Night operations that German doctrine considered impossible due to blackout requirements and navigation difficulties were routine procedures for American supply columns. Infrared driving systems enabled movement without revealing positions to enemy aircraft, while maintaining speeds that matched daylight schedules. Radio communications functioned clearly despite electronic interference that disrupted German equipment, enabling coordination that kept convoys moving regardless of visibility conditions. The maintenance philosophy underlying American operations contradicted everything Weber had learned about equipment preservation during his military service. German doctrine emphasized conserving vehicles through careful use and minimal wear to extend operational life under resource constraints. American practices seemed almost wasteful, with trucks operated at maximum capacity and replaced rather than extensively repaired when maintenance requirements exceeded predetermined thresholds. By December 12th, Weber had documented convoy patterns that revealed systematic logistics, planning extending far beyond immediate tactical requirements. American operations functioned according to schedules that delivered specific cargo types to predetermined destinations with precision that German railway systems had never achieved during peacetime operations. The flexibility to modify routes, adjust schedules, and respond to changing requirements demonstrated organizational capability that Wehrmacht doctrine couldn't comprehend. The implications of Weber's observations extended beyond tactical considerations to fundamental strategic questions about German assumptions regarding Allied industrial capacity. If American factories could sustain such production rates indefinitely, while German manufacturing declined under bombing pressure and resource shortages, prolonged resistance would only delay inevitable defeat, rather than creating opportunities for negotiated settlements or tactical reversals that might alter war outcomes. Weber's ammunition supply had decreased to fewer than 400 rounds during his extended observation period. The machine gun position that should have received regular resupply hadn't been replenished in nearly 2 months. Meanwhile, American trucks transported small arms ammunition in quantities that German companies consumed during entire months of combat operations, illustrating the fundamental disparity between industrial abundance and wartime scarcity. The communication equipment visible on American vehicles represented technological capabilities that German forces had never possessed, even during World War II, the victorious campaigns of 1940 and 1941. Radio systems functioned clearly across distances where German equipment produced only static interference. Coordination between convoy commanders, receiving units, and intermediate supply points operated with precision that eliminated the confusion plaguing Wehrmacht logistics operations. American convoy security procedures included redundant protection measures that German resource constraints made impossible to implement. Multiple armored vehicles provided overlapping fields of fire, while maintaining formation speeds that prevented bottlenecks. These escorts carried heavy weapons capable of defeating German infiltration attempts, while radio communications enabled rapid reinforcement if convoys encountered serious opposition that local forces couldn't handle independently. The psychological impact on German defenders proved cumulative, as each passing day brought fresh evidence of American logistics superiority that tactical action couldn't overcome. Weber's reports to regimental headquarters documented vehicle counts, cargo estimates, and operational patterns. But the statistics only confirmed what every German soldier witnessing these convoys understood intuitively. American industrial capacity exceeded German ability to interdict supply lines through conventional military action. Weber's field telephone conversations with other observation posts revealed that similar convoy operations extended across the entire Western Front without apparent coordination problems or resource limitations. Every defensive position reported continuous American truck movements, maintaining supply lines that fed Allied armies regardless of weather conditions, tactical situations, or German interdiction attempts that achieved only minor temporary disruptions. The maintenance vehicles interspersed among supply trucks provided mobile workshop capabilities that addressed mechanical problems before they became serious failures, requiring extensive repair time. German maintenance doctrine required vehicles to return to rear area facilities for major service, removing them from operational use for extended periods that reduced overall transportation capacity when it was needed most critically. American fuel trucks operated continuously between supply depots and forward positions, maintaining petroleum availability that enabled Allied forces to conduct operations without the movement restrictions that had constrained Wehrmacht planning since fuel shortages became critical in 1942. These vehicles carried gasoline in quantities representing weeks of German allocation for entire armored divisions, demonstrating abundance that made conservation strategies irrelevant. The medical evacuation capabilities built into American logistics operations demonstrated systematic integration that addressed personnel welfare comprehensively, rather than treating it as secondary priority. Wounded individuals received immediate transportation to treatment facilities using dedicated vehicles that remained operational regardless of combat conditions that might disrupt other transportation activities. Weber realized that American truck convoys represented the visible manifestation of industrial mobilization that had converted civilian manufacturing capacity into military logistics capability without sacrificing production quality or quantity. Every vehicle embodied economic power that Germany couldn't match even under ideal peacetime conditions, when resource availability wasn't constrained by wartime requirements. and Allied bombing campaigns. The standardization visible in American equipment extended beyond mechanical components to operational procedures that enabled efficient coordination across vast distances. Traffic control methods, maintenance schedules, and communication protocols functioned identically regardless of geographic location or tactical situation. This uniformity eliminated the confusion that plagued German operations, where different units employed varying procedures that complicated coordination efforts. Weather challenges that would have completely halted German transportation continued having minimal impact on American convoy schedules through specialized equipment and training that Wehrmacht forces had never received. Salt spreaders prevented ice formation, while snow removal equipment cleared accumulations that would have blocked German movements entirely, demonstrating preparation for winter operations that German logistics had never achieved systematically. American drivers maintained operational tempos that German doctrine considered impossible under combat conditions. Yet these men operated with apparent confidence in their equipment reliability and support systems. Training programs had produced competent operators who could navigate complex routes, perform emergency repairs, and coordinate with other convoy elements using standardized procedures that functioned effectively regardless of individual experience levels. The cargo handling equipment visible on American trucks enabled efficient loading and unloading operations that reduced time requirements at supply points where vehicles were vulnerable to enemy action. Hydraulic systems, mechanical winches, and specialized containers accelerated material transfer rates that German manual methods couldn't match, even with additional personnel devoted to such tasks. Weber's growing understanding of American logistics superiority crystallized into recognition that these convoys embodied systematic preparation that had begun years before American entry into the war. Industrial planning, equipment development, and training programs had created capabilities that German improvisation couldn't duplicate, even if resources were available to attempt such comprehensive organizational efforts. The trucks kept coming because American abundance had transformed military logistics from operational constraint into strategic advantage that German forces couldn't overcome through tactical brilliance or individual heroism. Every vehicle demonstrated economic capacity and organizational skill that rendered German scarcity strategies meaningless exercises in desperation rather than viable military doctrine. As December 13th dawned with heavy snowfall that should have paralyzed vehicular movement, Weber watched American convoys maintain their schedules with mechanical precision that seemed to mock natural obstacles. The lead vehicles in each formation carried snow removal equipment that cleared paths for following trucks, while specialized tires and weight distribution systems provided traction on surfaces where German vehicles would have been completely immobilized. The implications of Weber's extended observations had evolved from tactical intelligence gathering into profound recognition that German strategic assumptions about Allied capabilities had been catastrophically wrong from the war's beginning. American industrial capacity hadn't just exceeded German estimates, but had operated on scales that made Wehrmacht resource planning irrelevant to actual combat requirements. Weber's radio crackled with increasingly desperate reports from Wehrmacht units across the front. Battery commanders reported ammunition expenditures that would have lasted German artillery batteries for weeks, being delivered to single American gun positions daily. Tank destroyer crews described endless streams of replacement vehicles arriving to replace combat losses within hours, rather than the weeks German units waited for single replacement tanks. The pattern was unmistakable and terrifying. American logistics operated without the constraints that governed every German military decision. The convoy that materialized through the December 13th blizzard, at precisely 0800 hours, carried equipment that Weber initially couldn't identify. Massive crates secured beneath canvas covers suggested machinery rather than conventional supplies. As the formation passed his observation point, he glimpsed stenciled markings indicating engineering equipment manufactured in factories whose names he didn't recognize. Caterpillar, International Harvester, Alice Chalmers. American companies that had converted from peacetime construction to military production with apparent seamlessness. What Weber witnessed wasn't just transportation, but the visible proof of economic mobilization that had transformed entire industries without disrupting production quality or delivery schedules. These weren't hastily converted civilian trucks pressed into military service, but purpose-built vehicles designed specifically for combat logistics. The engineering specifications exceeded anything German industry had achieved, even during the prosperous years before rearmament consumed civilian manufacturing capacity. The maintenance procedures that kept these convoys operational in conditions that would have defeated German equipment demonstrated planning that anticipated every possible mechanical failure. Mobile workshops carried replacement engines, transmissions, and drive systems that could be installed using portable lifting equipment. German maintenance required specialized facilities and trained technicians who weren't available in forward areas where breakdowns occurred most frequently. Each American truck carried diagnostic equipment that enabled drivers to identify mechanical problems before they caused operational failures. Electrical testing devices, pressure gauges, and temperature monitoring systems provided early warning of developing issues that German drivers discovered only when vehicles stopped functioning entirely. This predictive maintenance philosophy reflected industrial abundance that made prevention more economical than emergency repairs. The fuel distribution systems supporting these operations demonstrated petroleum logistics that German planners couldn't have imagined possible. Tank trucks arrived at predetermined intervals carrying refined gasoline that had been transported across the Atlantic through multiple intermediate storage facilities and delivered precisely when convoy schedules required refueling. The coordination required for such operations exceeded German organizational capability even during peacetime when resource constraints didn't complicate planning. Weber observed American traffic control procedures that revealed communication systems extending far beyond individual convoy operations. Radio networks connected supply columns with receiving units, intermediate depots, and higher headquarters through real-time coordination that adapted to changing battlefield conditions instantly. German communications relied on telephone lines that Allied aircraft systematically destroyed, leaving Wehrmacht units isolated from logistical support when they needed it most desperately. The psychological warfare aspects of these continuous operations proved as effective as their material contributions to Allied combat capability. German soldiers witnessing American abundance understood that their own shortages represented permanent disadvantages rather than temporary inconveniences caused by tactical disruptions. While Wehrmacht units hoarded individual cartridges and rationed fuel by liters, American forces operated with resource confidence that suggested unlimited industrial backing. American drivers demonstrated professional competency that surprised German observers expecting amateur soldiers struggling with complex military equipment. These men had received standardized training on vehicles designed for simplified operation and maintenance. Automatic transmissions eliminated driving skills that required extensive practice. Power steering reduced physical demands during long-haul operations. Standardized controls enabled any trained operator to drive any truck without familiarization periods. The cargo documentation visible through truck cab windows suggested inventory control systems that tracked every item from manufacturing facilities to ultimate destinations with precision German logistics had never achieved. Computerized records, though Weber didn't understand the technology involved, enabled supply officers to locate specific materials anywhere within the distribution network. German systems relied on manual paperwork that became unreliable under combat conditions. Weather conditions that completely halted German transportation seemed to pose minimal challenges for American convoy operations. Specialized equipment cleared snow accumulations, while chemical treatments prevented ice formation on roadways. The trucks themselves incorporated design features that provided traction and stability in conditions where German vehicles lost control entirely. All-wheel drive systems, weight distribution, and tire compounds represented engineering advances that Wehrmacht transportation had never possessed. The ammunition handling procedures employed by American personnel combined safety consciousness with operational efficiency in ways that German doctrine couldn't duplicate. Explosive materials moved through supply chains operated by drivers who understood both regulatory requirements and tactical necessities. Training programs had produced competent handlers without requiring the years of specialized experience that German systems demanded for similar responsibilities. American truck crews carried personal equipment representing quality standards that German soldiers hadn't experienced since before the war began. Reliable boots, warm clothing, functional weapons, and adequate rations maintained morale throughout logistics operations extending from port facilities to frontline positions. Even support personnel received resources that Wehrmacht combat units couldn't obtain through normal supply channels. The medical support integrated throughout American convoy operations provided systematic attention to personnel welfare that German logistics had never prioritized adequately. Ambulances traveled with supply formations, ensuring immediate evacuation of individuals injured during transportation operations. Medical equipment, surgical supplies, and pharmaceutical stocks moved through identical channels that delivered ammunition and fuel. Weber noticed that American convoy routing demonstrated planning sophistication, requiring communication systems and coordination staffs beyond German organizational capability. Supply vehicles carrying different cargo types followed separate paths designed to prevent congestion at delivery points, where multiple units received materials simultaneously. Schedules synchronized with unit movements ensured supplies arrived when needed, rather than creating storage problems in forward areas. The fuel consumption rates that should have constrained such extensive operations posed no apparent limitations on American logistics planning. Each truck burned gasoline at rates that would have exhausted German reserves within days. Yet convoys operated continuously without concern for petroleum availability. American abundance made conservation strategies that dominated Wehrmacht planning completely irrelevant to Allied operational requirements. Night operations that German doctrine considered impossible due to blackout requirements were routine procedures for American supply columns. Infrared driving systems enabled movement without revealing positions to enemy aircraft, while maintaining speeds that matched daylight schedules. Radio communications functioned clearly despite electronic interference that disrupted German equipment, enabling coordination regardless of visibility conditions. The maintenance philosophy underlying American operations contradicted everything Weber had learned about equipment preservation during his military training. German doctrine emphasized conserving vehicles through careful use and minimal wear to extend operational life under resource constraints. American practices seemed almost wasteful, with trucks operated at maximum capacity and replaced rather than extensively repaired when maintenance requirements exceeded predetermined thresholds. By December 14th, Weber had documented convoy patterns revealing systematic logistics, planning extending far beyond immediate tactical requirements. American operations functioned according to schedules that delivered specific cargo types to predetermined destinations with precision that German railway systems had never achieved during peacetime. The flexibility to modify routes, adjust schedules, and respond to changing requirements demonstrated organizational capability that Wehrmacht doctrine couldn't comprehend. The implications of Weber's observations extended beyond tactical considerations to fundamental strategic questions about German assumptions regarding Allied industrial capacity. If American factories could sustain such production rates indefinitely, while German manufacturing declined under bombing pressure and resource shortages, prolonged resistance would only delay inevitable defeat rather than creating opportunities for negotiated settlements. Weber's ammunition supply had decreased to fewer than 300 rounds during his extended observation period. The machine gun position that should have received regular resupply hadn't been replenished in over 2 months. Meanwhile, American trucks transported small arms ammunition in quantities that German battalions consumed during entire months of combat operations, illustrating fundamental disparity between industrial abundance and wartime scarcity. The communication equipment visible on American vehicles represented technological capabilities that German forces had never possessed, even during World War II victorious campaigns of 1940 and 1941. Radio systems functioned clearly across distances where German equipment produced only static interference. Coordination between convoy commanders, receiving units, and intermediate supply points operated with precision that eliminated confusion plaguing Wehrmacht logistics operations. American convoy security procedures included redundant protection measures, that German resource constraints made impossible to implement. Multiple armored vehicles provided overlapping fields of fire, while maintaining formation speeds that prevented bottlenecks. These escorts carried heavy weapons capable of defeating German infiltration attempts, while radio communications enabled rapid reinforcement if convoys encountered serious opposition. The psychological impact on German defenders proved cumulative, as each passing day brought fresh evidence of American logistics superiority that tactical action couldn't overcome. Weber's reports to regimental headquarters documented vehicle counts, but statistics, cargo estimates, and operational patterns only confirmed what every German soldier witnessing these convoys understood intuitively. American industrial capacity exceeded German ability to interdict supply lines through conventional military action. Weber's field telephone conversations with other observation posts revealed that similar convoy operations extended across the entire Western Front without apparent coordination problems or resource limitations. Every defensive position reported continuous American truck movements, maintaining supply lines that fed Allied armies regardless of weather conditions, tactical situations, or German interdiction attempts that achieved only minor temporary disruptions. The maintenance vehicles interspersed among supply trucks provided mobile workshop capabilities that addressed mechanical problems before they became serious failures, requiring extensive repair time. German maintenance doctrine required vehicles to return to rear area facilities for major service, removing them from operational use for extended periods that reduced overall transportation capacity when needed most critically. American fuel trucks operated continuously between supply depots and forward positions, maintaining petroleum availability that enabled Allied forces to conduct operations without movement restrictions that had constrained Wehrmacht planning since fuel shortages became critical in 1942. These vehicles carried gasoline in quantities representing weeks of German allocation for entire armored divisions. The medical evacuation capabilities built into American logistics operations demonstrated systematic integration that addressed personnel welfare comprehensively, rather than treating it as secondary priority. Wounded individuals received immediate transportation to treatment facilities using dedicated vehicles that remained operational regardless of combat conditions that might disrupt other transportation activities. Weber realized that American truck convoys represented visible manifestation of industrial mobilization that had converted civilian manufacturing capacity into military logistics capability without sacrificing production quality or quantity. Every vehicle embodied economic power that Germany couldn't match even under ideal peacetime conditions, when resource availability wasn't constrained by wartime requirements and Allied bombing campaigns. The standardization visible in American equipment extended beyond mechanical components to operational procedures that enabled efficient coordination across vast distances. Traffic control methods, maintenance schedules, and communication protocols functioned identically regardless of geographic location or tactical situation. This uniformity eliminated confusion that plagued German operations, where different units employed varying procedures that complicated coordination efforts. Weather challenges that would have completely halted German transportation continued having minimal impact on American convoy schedules through specialized equipment and training that Wehrmacht forces had never received. Salt spreaders prevented ice formation, while snow removal equipment cleared accumulations that would have blocked German movements entirely, demonstrating preparation for winter operations that German logistics had never achieved systematically. American drivers maintained operational tempos that German doctrine considered impossible under combat conditions. Yet these men operated with apparent confidence in their equipment reliability and support systems. Training programs had produced competent operators who could navigate complex routes, perform emergency repairs, and coordinate with other convoy elements using standardized procedures that functioned effectively regardless of individual experience levels. The cargo handling equipment visible on American trucks enabled efficient loading and unloading operations that reduced time requirements at supply points where vehicles were vulnerable to enemy action. Hydraulic systems, mechanical winches, and specialized containers accelerated material transfer rates that German manual methods couldn't match, even with additional personnel devoted to such tasks. Weber's growing understanding of American logistic superiority crystallized into recognition that these convoys embodied systematic preparation that had begun years before American entry into the war. Industrial planning, equipment development, and training programs had created capabilities that German improvisation couldn't duplicate, even if resources were available to attempt such comprehensive organizational efforts. The trucks kept coming because American abundance had transformed military logistics from operational constraint into strategic advantage that German forces couldn't overcome through tactical brilliance or individual heroism. Every vehicle demonstrated economic capacity and organizational skill that rendered German scarcity strategies meaningless exercises in desperation rather than viable military doctrine. As December 15th arrived with temperatures dropping to -20°C, conditions that would have completely immobilized German vehicle operations, Weber watched American convoys maintain their schedules with modifications that demonstrated planning for extreme weather conditions. Engine block heaters prevented freezing, while specialized lubricants maintained mechanical function at temperatures where German equipment became inoperable. The convoy that emerged through the pre-dawn darkness at 0530 hours carried cargo that Weber recognized as bridging equipment, massive steel components that would enable river crossings where German demolitions had destroyed permanent structures. The engineering capability required to design, manufacture, and transport such equipment across thousands of kilometers exceeded anything Wehrmacht engineering units had possessed during their most successful operations. American bridge-building operations that Weber had observed from his position demonstrated construction techniques that German engineers couldn't duplicate with available equipment and materials. Portable spans assembled using standardized components could support tank traffic within hours of installation. German engineering relied on time-consuming construction methods that required specialized materials and skilled craftsmen who weren't available in forward areas. The pontoon bridging equipment visible on several trucks represented floating bridge technology that enabled rapid river crossings without requiring extensive preparation or specialized landing sites. German pontoon bridges required careful site selection and extensive assembly time that made them vulnerable to enemy interdiction. American systems could be deployed rapidly under combat conditions. Weber observed that American convoy operations included specialized vehicles for tasks that German forces performed manually when resources permitted such operations at all. Crane trucks loaded and unloaded heavy cargo without requiring separate lifting equipment. Wrecker vehicles recovered disabled trucks without disrupting convoy movements. Generator trucks provided electrical power for maintenance operations in locations where fixed facilities didn't exist. The fuel heating systems that prevented petroleum products from freezing in sub-zero temperatures demonstrated engineering attention to operational details that German logistics had never addressed systematically. Heated fuel lines, insulated tanks, and circulation pumps maintained fuel flow when German systems would have been completely blocked by ice formation. American radio communications functioned clearly in weather conditions that disrupted German equipment through atmospheric interference and equipment failures caused by extreme cold. Antenna systems, transmitter reliability, and receiver sensitivity provided coordination capabilities that enabled convoy operations to continue when German units lost contact with higher headquarters and entirely. The spare parts inventories carried by individual trucks exceeded what German units received for quarterly maintenance allocations across entire vehicle fleets. Replacement components for engines, transmissions, electrical systems, and mechanical assemblies enabled field repairs that kept vehicles operational without requiring return to major maintenance facilities located hundreds of kilometers behind combat zones. Weber noticed that American truck crews rotated regularly to prevent fatigue that would compromise operational safety and efficiency. Relief drivers took over vehicles without stopping convoy movement, maintaining schedules that German operations couldn't achieve, even with unlimited personnel availability. Driver training programs had produced qualified operators who could perform effectively regardless of individual experience levels. The heating systems installed in American truck cabs maintained operator comfort in conditions that would have rendered German drivers ineffective within hours. Cabin heaters, windshield defrosters, and seat warmers enabled extended operations in weather that forced German personnel to seek shelter or risk frostbite that would eliminate them from operational duty. American convoy security adapted to winter conditions through equipment modifications that German forces couldn't implement due to resource limitations. Armored vehicles carried additional insulation, heating systems, and cold weather lubricants that maintained weapons functionality when German equipment became inoperable. Radio communications between escort vehicles functioned reliably despite atmospheric conditions that disrupted Wehrmacht coordination. The medical support integrated throughout American convoy operations included cold weather treatment capabilities that addressed hypothermia, frostbite, and weather-related injuries that became common during winter operations. Heated ambulances, medical supplies adapted for extreme temperatures, and trained personnel maintained casualty care standards that German medical services couldn't achieve under similar conditions. Weber realized that American preparations for winter warfare extended beyond individual equipment improvements to systematic planning that anticipated every aspect of cold weather operations. Supply chains delivered winter-specific materials, maintained challenging weather conditions, schedules adjusted for reduced temperature extremes, and operational procedures adapted to observed demonstrated planning. Daylight and Mapipiechan, the convoy routing that Weber sophistication that enabled continued operations despite weather conditions that would have completely halted German transportation. Primary routes included alternate paths that remained passable when main highways became impossible. Supply depots positioned at strategic intervals ensured convoy range requirements could be met regardless of weather-related delays. American fuel consumption increased during winter operations due to heating requirements and cold weather engine inefficiency. Yet convoy schedules continued without apparent concern for petroleum availability. Additional fuel trucks compensated for increased consumption while heating equipment maintained fuel system functionality that German systems couldn't achieve under extreme temperature conditions. The maintenance procedures required for winter operations demonstrated American preparation that German forces had never achieved maintenance schedules, increased frequency, to address cold systematically, prevented weather mechanical stress. Specialized tools and lubricants enabled repairs under temperature conditions that would have made German maintenance impossible. Weber's observations during this extended cold period revealed that American logistics operations possessed depth and redundancy that enabled continued function regardless of weather conditions that completely paralyzed German transportation. Every aspect of convoy operations had been planned to address winter challenges that Wehrmacht logistics had never successfully overcome during previous campaigns. The psychological impact on German defenders intensified as they witnessed American capabilities that defied their understanding of logistics limitations under extreme conditions. While German units struggled to maintain basic operations during winter weather, American forces continued advancing with supply support that seemed immune to natural obstacles that had traditionally favored defensive operations. Weber's ammunition supply had decreased to fewer than 200 rounds, as his extended observation period continued through December's bitter cold. His machine gun position, which should have received winter-specific supplies, including antifreeze lubricants and cold weather ammunition, had been forgotten by German logistics systems, overwhelmed by competing priorities and resource shortages. The communication equipment that connected American convoys to coordination centers functioned with reliability that German systems couldn't match under ideal conditions, much less during extreme weather that caused equipment failures and atmospheric interference. Real-time coordination enabled immediate responses to changing conditions that kept supply operations functioning when German communications failed entirely. American convoy operations during December's extreme cold demonstrated systematic preparation for winter warfare that German forces had never achieved, despite extensive experience with Russian winters. Equipment modifications, supply adaptations, and operational procedures enabled continued function under conditions that had traditionally favored defenders familiar with local climate conditions. The trucks kept coming because American industrial planning had anticipated winter requirements and developed solutions that German improvisation couldn't duplicate, even if resources were available for such comprehensive preparation. Every vehicle represented economic capacity and organizational skill that rendered weather obstacles manageable rather than insurmountable barriers to military operations. Weber's growing desperation reached new depths as he realized that American logistic superiority extended beyond mere abundance to systematic competence that addressed every conceivable operational challenge. These convoys didn't just transport supplies, but demonstrated industrial civilization applied to warfare in ways that traditional military thinking couldn't comprehend or counter effectively. The implications of sustained American convoy operations under extreme winter conditions extended far beyond immediate tactical concerns to fundamental questions about German strategic assumptions. If Allied forces could maintain supply operations regardless of weather conditions that had traditionally provided defensive advantages to defending forces, German plans based on winter delays became meaningless exercises in wishful thinking. As December 16th brought the heaviest snowfall Weber had witnessed since beginning his observation duties, American convoys continued their relentless schedule with adaptations that seemed to anticipate every possible weather-related challenge. Snow removal equipment cleared paths ahead of supply columns, while specialized tires and traction systems provided mobility on surfaces where German vehicles would have been completely helpless. Weber understood that he was witnessing the culmination of industrial planning that had converted American peacetime abundance into wartime logistics capability that German scarcity strategies couldn't overcome through tactical action or strategic patience. The trucks kept coming because American democracy had proven capable of sustained effort that totalitarian systems couldn't match, despite ideological claims about superior organization and national dedication. Weber's field glasses fogged repeatedly in the sub-zero temperatures, forcing him to wipe the lenses every few minutes to maintain observation of the American convoy operations that continued with mechanical precision, despite weather conditions that should have made vehicular movement impossible. Each breath created ice crystals that accumulated on his equipment, yet the American vehicles below maintained their formation, spacing, and operational tempo as if December's brutal cold posed no greater challenge than summer heat. The convoy that materialized at 06:45 hours through the blowing snow carried equipment that Weber initially mistook for artillery pieces. As the formation passed closer to his position, he recognized the distinctive shapes of construction machinery beneath canvas, covers that flapped violently in the Arctic wind. Bulldozers, excavators, and road graders manufactured by companies whose names appeared on stenciled markings he could barely read through the swirling precipitation. These weren't military vehicles, but civilian construction equipment that had been requisitioned for military service without apparent modification or delay. What astounded Weber most wasn't the presence of such machinery, but the apparent ease with which American forces transported heavy equipment across terrain where German horse-drawn artillery struggled to move even basic supplies. The trucks carrying this construction equipment showed no signs of mechanical stress, despite loads that would have challenged German transportation under optimal conditions. Their engines ran smoothly in temperatures that would have prevented German vehicles from starting without extensive preparation. The hydraulic systems required to operate such construction equipment should have failed completely in sub-zero temperatures. Yet Weber observed American crews preparing machinery for immediate use upon arrival at destination points. Heated hydraulic fluid, insulated lines, and cold weather seals enabled continued operation under conditions that would have rendered German equipment completely inoperable. This attention to operational details under extreme conditions revealed planning depth that Wehrmacht logistics had never achieved. Each piece of construction equipment represented industrial capacity that had been converted from civilian infrastructure projects to military engineering support without apparent production delays or quality compromises. The speed with which American industry had transitioned from peacetime construction to wartime logistics exceeded anything German planners had considered possible when calculating Allied industrial response to prolonged conflict. The fuel requirements for such heavy equipment should have strained American petroleum distribution systems beyond operational limits. Yet convoy schedules continued without modification for increased consumption rates. Additional fuel trucks appeared at predetermined intervals, their heating systems maintaining petroleum fluidity that enabled continued equipment operation. German fuel shortages made such abundance seem almost insulting to forces that had been rationing individual liters since 1942. Weber observed American maintenance procedures that revealed systematic preparation for equipment operation under extreme conditions. Portable heating units warmed engine blocks before starting. Specialized lubricants maintained mechanical function at temperatures where German equipment seized completely. Battery heating systems ensured electrical reliability when German vehicles couldn't generate sufficient power to operate basic systems. The communication equipment connecting these construction units to engineering headquarters functioned with clarity that German radio systems couldn't achieve under ideal conditions. Real-time coordination between equipment operators, supply convoys, and tactical commanders enabled immediate response to changing battlefield requirements that kept construction projects advancing despite weather conditions that would have halted German engineering operations entirely. American crews operating this heavy equipment demonstrated professional competency that surprised German observers expecting amateur soldiers struggling with complex machinery. These men had received training on standardized equipment, using methods that produced qualified operators rapidly, rather than requiring the lengthy apprenticeships that German systems demanded for similar responsibilities. They could perform maintenance, troubleshoot problems, and operate under combat conditions with skill that matched peacetime construction workers. The spare parts inventories accompanying each piece of equipment exceeded what German engineering units received for annual maintenance allocations across entire equipment fleets. Replacement hydraulic pumps, transmission components, and electrical systems enabled field repairs that kept machinery operational without requiring return to major maintenance facilities located hundreds of kilometers behind combat zones. Weber noticed that American construction operations included specialized vehicles for tasks that German engineers performed manually when resources permitted such work at all. Concrete mixers transported ready-mix materials to construction sites. Crane trucks positioned heavy components without requiring separate lifting equipment. Generator trucks provided electrical power for construction operations in locations where fixed facilities didn't exist. The coordination between construction equipment and supply convoys demonstrated planning integration that German logistics had never achieved, even during successful offensive operations. Materials arrived precisely when construction schedules required them. Equipment positioning coordinated with tactical movements to ensure engineering support remained available when combat units needed it most. Supply deliveries synchronized with construction phases to prevent material shortages that would delay critical projects. American engineering capabilities that Weber observed from his position included bridge construction, road repair, and fortification work that proceeded simultaneously across multiple locations. The organizational skill required to coordinate such diverse projects while maintaining supply support exceeded anything Wehrmacht engineering had attempted even during peacetime, when resource availability wasn't constrained by combat requirements. The psychological warfare aspects of American construction operations proved as demoralizing as their material contributions to Allied combat capability. German soldiers witnessing rapid bridge construction, road repair, and fortification improvements understood that their defensive preparations couldn't match American engineering speed and capability. While Wehrmacht units struggled to maintain basic positions, American forces improved their tactical situation continuously through systematic engineering support. Weber's technical background enabled him to appreciate construction techniques that ordinary observers might dismiss as routine civil engineering. American bridge construction used prefabricated components that enabled rapid assembly under combat conditions. Road repair employed materials and equipment that provided durability exceeding peacetime highway standards. Fortification work incorporated design principles that offered protection superior to German defensive positions. The weather resistance displayed by American construction equipment contradicted everything Weber had learned about machinery operation under extreme conditions. Hydraulic systems functioned reliably despite temperature extremes that would have caused German equipment to fail catastrophically. Engine starting systems worked consistently when German vehicles required extensive preparation or couldn't be started at all. American fuel distribution systems supporting construction operations demonstrated petroleum logistics that German planners couldn't have imagined possible under combat conditions. Fuel heating equipment maintained fluid temperatures that enabled equipment operation. Distribution schedules ensured continuous availability despite consumption rates that would have exhausted German reserves within days. Fuel quality standards maintained equipment performance that German petroleum couldn't achieve. The maintenance philosophy underlying American construction operations contradicted traditional German approaches to equipment preservation under resource constraints. American practices emphasized operational readiness through preventive maintenance and component replacement, rather than conservation through minimal use. This abundance mentality reflected industrial capacity that could afford to prioritize mission accomplishment over equipment longevity. By December 17th, Weber had documented construction operations revealing systematic engineering planning that extended far beyond immediate tactical requirements. American projects proceeded according to schedules that anticipated future operational needs, rather than responding reactively to current problems. The planning sophistication required for such comprehensive engineering support exceeded German organizational capability even during peacetime conditions. The implications of American construction capability extended beyond immediate tactical advantages to strategic questions about German defensive planning. If Allied forces could rapidly construct bridges, repair roads, and build fortifications regardless of weather conditions or enemy action, German strategies based on denying terrain through destruction became exercises in temporary delay rather than effective impediment to enemy advance. Weber's position offered observation of American supply chains that delivered construction materials in quantities exceeding what German engineering units had possessed during their most successful operations. Steel beams, concrete components, and specialized hardware arrived on predetermined schedules that enabled continuous construction progress. German engineering relied on improvised materials and makeshift solutions that produced inferior results requiring constant maintenance. The quality control standards evident in American construction work exceeded what German engineering achieved during peacetime projects with unlimited time and resources. Bridge construction met specifications that provided load-bearing capacity superior to original German structures. Road repair created surfaces more durable than pre-war highways. Fortification work incorporated protection standards that surpassed German defensive positions. American construction crews worked in shifts that maintained progress around the clock, despite weather conditions that forced German personnel to seek shelter or risk cold weather injuries. Heated shelters, warm clothing, and medical support enabled continuous operations when German work details became ineffective due to exposure. Personnel rotation prevented fatigue that would compromise construction quality or safety standards. The coordination between American construction operations and tactical movements demonstrated integration that German forces had never achieved during offensive campaigns. Engineering support remained available when combat units needed river crossings, road improvements, or defensive positions. Construction schedules adapted to tactical requirements without compromising project quality or completion timelines. Weber observed that American construction equipment included innovations that German industry had never developed, despite extensive peacetime construction experience. Automated systems reduced personnel requirements while improving construction quality. Specialized attachments enabled single machines to perform multiple functions that would have required separate equipment in German operations. Standardized components simplified maintenance and repair procedures. The communication systems connecting construction sites with supply depots functioned with reliability that enabled real-time coordination of materials delivery and equipment positioning. Radio networks provided clear communication across distances where German systems failed completely. This coordination capability eliminated delays that would have extended construction timelines beyond tactical usefulness. American engineering operations included environmental considerations that German forces had never prioritized even during peacetime construction projects. Drainage systems prevented water damage to completed work. Surface treatments provided weather resistance that extended project durability. Foundation work exceeded minimum requirements to ensure long-term structural integrity. The psychological impact on German defenders then intensified as they witnessed construction progress that proceeded regardless of enemy action or weather conditions. Artillery bombardments that would have halted German engineering operations caused only temporary delays in American construction schedules. Counter-battery fire eliminated German guns before they could significantly disrupt Allied construction activities. Weber's ammunition supply had decreased to fewer than 100 rounds as his observation period extended through December's bitter cold and continuous American operations. His machine gun position represented a defensive capability that American construction operations would soon render meaningless through improved Allied tactical positions and supply capabilities. The medical support integrated throughout American construction operations included cold weather treatment capabilities and safety procedures that prevented weather-related casualties. Heated medical facilities, specialized equipment, and trained personnel maintained health standards that enabled continuous construction progress. German construction crews suffered casualty rates from cold exposure that reduced work effectiveness significantly. Weber realized that American construction capabilities represented systematic preparation for sustained military operations that German planning had never anticipated or prepared to counter. Industrial capacity, equipment development, and training programs had created engineering capabilities that traditional military doctrine couldn't comprehend or effectively oppose through conventional defensive measures. The construction equipment that Weber observed represented conversion of American civilian infrastructure capability into military engineering support without apparent production delays or capability reductions. The same industrial systems that had built American highways, bridges, and buildings were now constructing military facilities with efficiency that German engineering couldn't match under any circumstances. American construction operations demonstrated organizational principles that extended beyond engineering to fundamental approaches to military problem-solving. Systematic planning, resource allocation, and quality control created capabilities that rendered German defensive strategies based on terrain obstacles increasingly ineffective against Allied advance. The trucks kept coming, now accompanied by construction equipment that would reshape the battlefield itself in favor of American tactical requirements. Weber understood that he was witnessing not just transportation of supplies, but transformation of the combat environment through engineering capabilities that German forces couldn't match or effectively counter through traditional defensive methods. As December 18th brought weather conditions that should have completely halted construction activities, American engineering operations continued with adaptations that demonstrated planning for extreme weather work. Heated enclosures enabled concrete curing in sub-zero temperatures. Specialized materials maintained structural properties when standard construction materials would have failed completely. Equipment modifications provided reliable operation under conditions that rendered German machinery inoperable. Weber's growing desperation crystallized into understanding that American industrial civilization applied to warfare created capabilities that traditional military thinking couldn't anticipate or counter effectively. These construction operations didn't just support tactical requirements, but demonstrated economic power that could reshape physical geography to favor American operational requirements, regardless of natural obstacles or enemy defensive preparations. The implications of sustained American construction capability under extreme conditions extended beyond immediate tactical concerns to fundamental questions about the nature of modern warfare. If industrial nations could modify terrain, construct facilities, and create infrastructure faster than defending forces could destroy them, traditional concepts of defensive advantage became meaningless against sustained industrial effort. Weber watched American bulldozers carving roads through frozen ground that German equipment couldn't penetrate even with extensive preparation. Excavators dug foundations in soil conditions that would have required explosives for German construction crews to achieve similar results. The mechanical power available to American construction operations exceeded what German engineering possessed even during peacetime projects with unlimited resources. The heating systems that enabled American construction work in sub-zero temperatures represented technological solutions to problems that German engineering had never successfully addressed. Portable heating units maintained worksite temperatures that enabled personnel effectiveness. Material heating prevented freezing that would have made construction impossible. Equipment heating ensured mechanical reliability when German machinery became completely inoperable. American construction schedules that proceeded regardless of weather conditions or enemy action demonstrated planning confidence that German operations had never achieved, even during successful offensive campaigns. Project timelines incorporated contingencies for weather delays, enemy interdiction, and equipment failures without compromising completion requirements. This systematic approach to uncertainty reflected organizational capability that Wehrmacht planning had never developed. The quality of American construction work that Weber observed from his position exceeded standards that German engineering achieved during peacetime projects with unlimited time and resources. Bridge construction incorporated safety margins that provided capacity superior to tactical requirements. Road construction created surfaces more durable than necessary for immediate military needs. Fortification work exceeded protection requirements for current threat levels. Weber understood that American construction operations embodied systematic preparation that had converted civilian engineering capability into military advantage without sacrificing construction quality or operational efficiency. Every piece of equipment represented industrial capacity that Germany couldn't match, even under ideal peacetime conditions, when resource availability wasn't constrained by combat requirements and Allied bombing campaigns. The construction crews that operated this equipment demonstrated professional competency that enabled complex engineering work under combat conditions that would have challenged peacetime specialists. Training programs had produced qualified operators who could perform effectively regardless of weather conditions, enemy action, or equipment complications that would have rendered German construction operations impossible. American engineering capabilities that Weber witnessed represented the visible manifestation of industrial democracy applied to warfare through systematic conversion of civilian infrastructure capability into military advantage. The same organizational principles that had built American cities' facilities were now creating tactical advantages that German had transformed military engineering through traditional military methods. The defensive strategies couldn't overcome trucks kept coming because American abundance preparation. Every vehicle and every from logistical constraint piece of construction equipment demonstrated economic capacity and into strategic advantage that German forces couldn't counter through tactical brilliance or defensive highways and industrial organizational skill that rendered German scarcity strategies meaningless exercises in desperation rather than viable military doctrine. As December 19th dawned with temperatures plummeting to -30 Celsius, Weber witnessed something that assumption about logistics defied every limitations under extreme weather conditions. The convoy that emerged through the pre-dawn darkness carried specialized cold weather equipment he had never seen before. Massive heating units mounted on truck beds, ascenderic sacks releasing. This dissipated quickly in the frigid air clouds of steam that but purposized solutions-built systems designed specifically for Arctic operations. The lead vehicle weren't improv in this formation, pulled what appeared to be a mobile power plant. Its diesel generator humming stead, German equipment dilly despite conditions that would have prevented from starting entirely. Behind it, trucks carried insulated containers that Weber realized must contain materials requiring temperature control, chemical compounds recants, and specialized LUB fluids that maintained their properties regardless of weather extremes that rendered German equivalents useless. Weber adjusted his frost-covered field glasses and counted 43 vehicles in this particular convoy, each one equipped with modifications that enabled operation under conditions no German planner had ever considered survivable for mechanized forces. Engine block heaters maintained starting capability. Cabin heating systems kept operators functional during extended missions. Even the tires appeared different, red patterns and with TD rubber compounds that provided traction on ice-covered surfaces where German vehicles would have been completely helpless. The maintenance procedures required for such extreme weather operations demonstrated American preparation that exceeded anything Wehrmacht logistics had attempted even during the Russian campaign. Mobile heating units warmed engine compartments before starting procedures. Specialized tools funked brittle and unreined at temperatures where German equipment became systems ensured electrical power liable. Battery heating when normal batteries would have frozen solid within hours. What struck Weber most profoundly wasn't the individual adaptations, but the systematic nature of American cold weather preparation. Every aspect of convoy operations had been modified to address temperature extremes. Fuel additives prevented freezing in supply lines. Hydraulic fluids maintained viscosity at temperatures where standard lubricants would have solidified completely. Even the canvas covers protecting cargo appeared to be that remain made from materials inflexible despite conditions that would have made normal fabric crack like glass. The communication equipment connecting these cold weather convoys to coordination centers functioned with reliability that German radio systems couldn't achieve under normal conditions, much less during weather that caused atmospheric interference and equipment failures. Antenna systems designed for Arctic operations maintained signal clarity across distances where Wehrmacht communications failed entirely. This coordination capability enabled real-time adaptation to changing conditions that kept supply operations functioning when German units lost contact with higher headquarters. American drivers operating in these extreme conditions demonstrated training that enabled effective performance despite weather that would have incapacitated German personnel within hours. Cold weather clothing, heated cab systems, and rotation schedules prevented the frostbite and hypothermia that plagued Wehrmacht operations during winter campaigns. Relief drivers maintained operational tempo without requiring extended warm-up periods that would have disrupted convoy schedules. The fuel consumption rates during such extreme weather operations increased dramatically due to heating requirements and engine inefficiency. Yet, American convoy schedules continued without apparent concern for petroleum availability. Additional fuel trucks compensated for increased consumption, while fuel heating equipment maintained fluid temperatures that enabled continued operations. German fuel shortages made such abundance seem almost mocking to forces that had been rationing individual liters since the previous winter. Weber observed that American cold weather supply chains delivered materials specifically adapted for extreme temperature operations, ammunition that functioned reliably despite thermal stress, rations that remained edible despite freezing conditions, medical supplies that maintained effectiveness when standard pharmaceuticals would have been destroyed by temperature extremes. This comprehensive approach to cold weather logistics demonstrated planning depth that German systems had never achieved. The convoy routing during extreme weather conditions revealed planning sophistication that anticipated every possible complication caused by temperature extremes. Primary routes included alternate paths that remained passable when main highways became impassable due to ice formation or snow accumulation. Supply depots positioned at strategic intervals ensured convoy range requirements could be met regardless of weather-related delays that would have stranded German formations. American cold weather operations included specialized vehicles for tasks that German forces couldn't perform at all during winter conditions. Snow removal equipment cleared paths for following convoys. Salt-spreading trucks prevented ice formation on critical routes. Mobile workshops provided heated environments where maintenance work could continue, despite external temperatures that would have made German repairs impossible. The spare parts inventories carried during cold weather operations exceeded what German units received for annual maintenance allocations. Replacement components designed for extreme temperature operation enabled field repairs that kept equipment functional when standard parts would have failed immediately. Heating elements, insulated housings, and cold weather seals provided reliability that German equipment never possessed. Weber noticed that American convoy security adapted to winter conditions through equipment modifications that German forces couldn't implement due to resource constraints. Armored escort vehicles carried heating systems that maintained weapons functionality when German equipment became inoperable due to thermal stress. Radio communications between security elements functioned clearly despite atmospheric conditions that disrupted Wehrmacht coordination entirely. The medical support integrated throughout cold weather convoy operations included treatment capabilities specifically designed for hypothermia, frostbite, and weather-related injuries that became common during extreme temperature operations. Heated ambulances maintained patient care standards that German medical services couldn't achieve under similar conditions. Specialized medical equipment functioned reliably when standard instruments would have failed completely. American construction equipment accompanying these capabilities that enable cold weather convoys demonstrated engineering continued work despite conditions that would have halted German construction operations entirely. Heated hydraulic systems maintained machinery function at temperatures where German equipment ceased completely. Portable heating units created work environments where personnel could remain effective during extended construction. Defenders intensified as they witnessed American projects. The psychological impact on German capabilities that seemed immune to natural obstacles that had traditionally favored defensive operations. While Wehrmacht units struggled to maintain basic functions during extreme weather, American forces continued advancing with supply support that appeared unlimited by environmental conditions that should have provided tactical advantages to defending forces familiar with local climate conditions. Weber's own position illustrated the contrast between American abundance and German scarcity during extreme weather operations. His concrete bunker lacked heating beyond what body warmth and a small brazier could provide. His ammunition supply had dwindled to fewer than 50 rounds as supply difficulties defied with intensifying worsening weather. Meanwhile, American convoys transported cold weather supplies in quantities that suggested unlimited industrial backing for operations under any conceivable conditions. The communication equipment that connected American cold weather operations functioned with precision that enabled immediate responses to changing conditions. Real-time weather reports, route modifications, and supply adjustments flowed through networks that remained operational when German communications failed due to equipment limitations and atmospheric interference. This coordination capability maintained operational tempo regardless of weather complications that would have paralyzed Wehrmacht movements. American fuel distribution during extreme weather operations demonstrated petroleum logistics that German planners couldn't have conceived possible under such conditions. Fuel heating systems maintained fluid temperatures that enabled equipment operation. Distribution schedules adapted to increased consumption rates without compromising supply availability. Fuel quality standards ENs couldn't achieve under endured equipment performance that German petroleum underlying American cold weather operations contradicted circumstances. The maintenance philosophy, everything Weber had learned about equipment preservation under extreme conditions. American practices emphasized operational readiness through specialized components and preventive care use. This approach, rather than conservation through limité, reflected industrial capacity that could afford to prioritize mission accomplishment over equipment longevity even under the most challenging environmental conditions. By December 20th, Weber had documented cold weather operations that revealed systematic preparation extending far beyond tactical adaptations to comprehensive planning for sustained operations under extreme environmental conditions. American forces operated according to schedules that treated weather as a manageable variable, rather than an insurmountable obstacle to military capability extended beyond immediate tactical concerns operations. The implications of American cold weather to strategic questions about German defensive planning. If Allied forces could maintain full operational capability regardless of weather conditions that had traditionally provided seasonal advantages to defending forces, German strategies based on winter delays became meaningless exercises in wishful thinking, rather than realistic assessments of operational limitations. Weber's field telephone reported similar observations from defensive positions across the entire front. Every outpost confirmed continuous American operations that maintained full capability despite weather conditions that had completely paralyzed German transportation and supply systems. The scale of cold weather preparation exceeded anything Wehrmacht planning had considered necessary or achievable under wartime resource constraints. The standardization visible in American cold weather equipment extended beyond mechanical modifications to operational procedures that functioned identically regardless extremes. Traffic of temperature control methods, maintenance schedules, and communication protocols operated consistently despite environmental conditions that would have required complete procedural modifications in German operations. American drivers maintained operational tempos during extreme weather that German doctrine considered impossible even under ideal conditions. Training programs had produced operators who could function effectively in environmental conditions that would have required specialized personnel with years of Arctic experience in Wehrmacht systems. This standardized competency eliminated the bottlenecks that would have constrained German cold weather operations. The cargo handling procedures employed during extreme weather operations demonstrated engineering solutions to problems German forces had never successfully addressed. Heated load-in temperatures where German machinery equipment functioned reliably became inoperable. Specialized containers protected sensitive materials from temperature damage that would have destroyed supplies using standard German packaging methods. Weber observed that American cold weather supply chains included materials and equipment specifically designed for extreme temperature operations. Everything from ammunition to medical supplies had been adapted to function reliably under conditions that would have rendered German equivalents useless. This comprehensive approach to environmental adaptation demonstrated planning depth that Wehrmacht logistics had never achieved. American construction operations during extreme weather proceeded with adaptations that enabled continued work despite conditions that would have made German engineering impossible. Heated work environments, specialized materials, and equipment modifications provided construction capability when German forces couldn't even maintain existing positions effectively. This engineering advantage created tactical benefits that defending forces couldn't counter through conventional methods. The weather resistance displayed by American equipment contradicted everything Weber had learned about mechanical limitations under extreme conditions. Hydraulic systems, electrical components, and engine systems functioned reliably at temperatures that would have caused catastrophic failures in German equipment. This reliability enabled sustained operations when German forces became increasingly ineffective due to equipment limitations. Weber realized that American cold weather operations represented systematic preparation that had converted potential environmental obstacles into manageable operational variables. Industrial planning, equipment development, and training programs had created capabilities that rendered weather conditions largely irrelevant to American operational requirements, while simultaneously intensifying German difficulties. The trucks kept coming because American industrial preparation had anticipated every conceivable environmental challenge and developed solutions that German improvisation couldn't duplicate. Every vehicle represented economic capacity and organizational skill that transformed natural obstacles into minor inconveniences rather than operational constraints that traditional military planning had always accepted as unchangeable limitations. As December 21st brought the winter solstice and the longest night of the year, American convoy operations adapted with lighting systems that enabled full operational capability during extended darkness. Mobile illumination units provided work lighting that enabled construction and maintenance activities to continue around the clock. Night vision equipment allowed navigation without revealing positions to enemy observation, while maintaining operational security. Weber understood that he was witnessing the culmination of industrial civilization applied to warfare through systematic conversion of every conceivable advantage into military capability. American forces operated with environmental independence that rendered traditional concepts of seasonal limitations meaningless against sustained industrial effort backed by unlimited resources and comprehensive planning. The implications of American environmental independence extended beyond immediate operational concerns to fundamental questions about the nature of modern warfare itself. If industrial nations could overcome natural obstacles through systematic preparation and unlimited resource application, traditional military advantages based on terrain, weather, and seasonal factors became irrelevant against enemies possessing sufficient industrial capacity and organizational competence. Weber's frosted fingers trembled as he reached for his field telephone on December 22nd. The line crackling with static that seemed to mock the crystal-clear American radio communications he had been intercepting for days. The rigid, barely mental commander's voice carried concealed desperation as he demanded Weber's latest intelligence report on enemy convoy movements. What could Weber possibly tell him that would change anything? That American logistics operated with supernatural efficiency? That their supply chains functioned like clockwork mechanisms, immune to weather, terrain, or German interdiction? The convoy emerging through the pre-dawn gloom at 0520 hours carried something Weber had never seen before. Massive cylindrical containers secured to specialized trailers, their surfaces gleaming with ice crystals that formed and reformed in the brutal December wind. Steam rose from heating elements wrapped around the containers like mechanical serpents, maintaining whatever contents lay within, tide the temperatures that def -30 environment them. These surrounding weren't ordinary supply trucks, but purpose-built transport systems, designed for materials so sensitive they required environmental control that German industry had never achieved. Weber set down his field telephone for the final time, his frozen fingers barely able to release the handset. The American convoy had disappeared into the eastern distance, but its rumble still echoed in his mind like thunder from an approaching storm. In those 15 days of observation, he had witnessed something that shattered every assumption German military doctrine had held sacred. These weren't just trucks delivering supplies. They were harbingers of a new kind of warfare where industrial abundance crushed tactical brilliance, where American factories had already won battles that German armies couldn't even comprehend they were fighting. The trucks kept coming because America had transformed war itself into an exercise in production, and Germany had brought rifles to a factory fight.